and welcome. You're watching NewsX with me, Devika Chopra. Top focus right now. The Reserve Bank of India is set for a change at its helm as Sanjay Malhotra prepares to step in as the new governor, succeeding Shaktikanta Das. Malhotra's tenure begins amidst significant challenges, including navigating economic growth, inflation control, and exchange rate stability, critical areas where Shaktikanta Das faced ongoing battles. He hails from Bikaner and he is a 1990 batch Indian Administrative Service Officer from Rajasthan cadre. Sanjay Malhotra is from IIT Kanpur and he is a graduate in computer science and holds a master's degree in public policy from Princeton University, USA. Sanjay Malhotra brings over 33 years of experience in various sectors including finance, power, IT, taxation, and mines, having served in senior roles at both the central and state levels. Before he was appointed Revenue Secretary in December 2022, he was Secretary in the Department of Financial Services, where he played a crucial role in steering financial reforms and strengthening the banking sector. His earlier tenure as Chairman and Managing Director of state-run REC Limited saw the company through significant growth phases. He has also served as the ex-officio secretary to the GST Council. He is the fourth bureaucrat from the Finance Ministry in recent years to take over as RBI governor. His experience in fiscal policy making, tax administration and financial services is expected to shape India's monetary policies. Meanwhile, in his parting message, Shaktikanta Das outlined 6 key tasks for the new RBI Governor Sanjay Malhotra. Firstly, to restore the growth-inflation balance, remain alert in a changing world, take cybersecurity and cyber challenges seriously, capitalize on harnessing benefits of new technology, pioneer the CBDC, and he believes that it has a huge potential in the future. And the last but not least, the challenge of financial inclusion. How exactly will the new RBI governor fare on all of these challenges that have been outlined? Only time will tell. But what does this mean for India, and truly where do the most crucial challenges lie? We take this conversation forward. I have with me Ajay Dua, former Secretary, Ministry of Industry and Commerce, Dr. Jayjeet Bhattacharya, President of CDEPR, and Dr. Sharad Kohli, Senior Economist, with us on the broadcast. Let me begin this conversation with Mr. Ajay Dua. Mr. Dua, what do you make of some of the challenges that have been outlined by the outgoing governor of the RBI when he talks about, of course, inflation, but also at the same time the changing global and geopolitical scenarios that we see in the world today?
I think Mr. Shaktikanta Das has done a very fine job during the 6 years that he was at the helm of RBI. It's very rare for a governor to have as long a term as he did of 6 years. Probably that's the only one out of the 25 who served the Reserve Bank hitherto. And he's always been he was always a practical man in the sense that he combined the perspectives of the Reserve Bank with those of the government and sorted out, and differences are bound to be there, as his passing remarks were on this subject as well yesterday, saying that we resolve these through internal dialogue without having to make these public. So I would say that it was a very good term, and 6 years is a long term. Changes, etc., probably at that point of time are desirable, because there is an age is also a factor in the scheme of things. He couldn't have been given a full 3-year term with his age coming. Age would have become a barrier to that. Having said that, I think he's pointed out the right things. And the two of them, and Mr. Malhotra, the incumbent, and he have worked together. He as the Reserve Bank governor and he as the Secretary Financial Reforms, and he would have been also on his board of directors. The new governor, the designated governor, he takes over tomorrow, as has been pointed out, is a very mature person, a man of few words, and as the press, one of the newspapers has called it, he will bring calming influence over the scheme of things, because he doesn't butt in when a discussion is going on and only gives considered views. And I would think that was the way his predecessor was also behaving, because prior to that, as we have seen, many governors had gone public, and that didn't do them well. It didn't do the government well, and it didn't do probably the economy also. It didn't serve the economic interests, particularly from the monetary point of view. Having said that, let me very quickly and hand over then back to you, Devika. Two things have been pointing out. Yes, we need to, Reserve Bank's primary task has been managing the economy from a monetary point of view, which has a direct linkage with inflation. That is why way back some 7 years ago or 8 years ago, it was brought about that let the Reserve Bank have a band within which to manage it, and that Reserve Bank adopted at the government's suggestion, plus 4% plus minus 2. That is from 2 to 6%. That is a very wide range, and within that, the central bank should be managing all its criteria, and that has been a difference, not just with Shaktikanta Das towards the end of his tenure, and he never went public, these are guessworks, and several other governors in the past, and more recently, I would say, we were ready during the Congress regime when on this particular issue, he and Mr. Chidambaram, the then finance minister, had a tiff, I would say virtually a tiff. One is, there's no master-servant relationship there, but certainly the difference came to the fore. So second thing, what Shaktikanta has said, a challenge is how to balance the growth interests, which the governments are usually more preoccupied with, and the Reserve Bank, more with stability of the financial system, and in that inflation plays a major role. Second point is he's talked about that apart from, Shaktikanta said, technology was a focus during his tenure at Bangalore, a very huge office of the Reserve Bank based on the state-of-the-art technology, incorporating that came about, and that is helping out in the Reserve Bank's own job of monitoring the banks, because it's in charge of banking operations as well as the new policies. A third thing which he has warned is against geopolitics and the effect of it on various things, including trade, capital flows, and inflation per se, because things like we have seen Suez Canal not remaining the popular route, things coming all the way through the Cape of Good Hope, South Africa, adding up to costs. So all the points which he has made are relevant, and he's also rightly expressed confidence that in his successor that he would be able to handle these things dexterously and to the best. And all that I can say is everybody tries to do to the best of his abilities. For how long you can control the factors, external factors, is not entirely within the hands of the Reserve Bank.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya, I want to bring you into the conversation. Now, Mrs. Shaktikanta Das's tenure was really marked by him guiding the Indian economy through very challenging periods of COVID-19, of a global pandemic, of worldwide instability economically, and at the same time of the eruption of wars in certain parts of the world. While COVID-19 has subsided, what do you think will be some of the key challenges that Mr. Sanjay Malhotra will really have to take up and look out for as far as the current geopolitical situations are concerned?
Right. No, indeed, Mr. Das did face a very, very challenging time. You see other economies collapsing. Sri Lankan economy collapsed. Bangladesh, Pakistan, they all collapsed. So that was very well managed of the economy that Mr. Shaktikanta Das brought in. But however, all those challenges haven't yet disappeared. As you rightly said, Devika, the wars continue, and there are aftershocks of those wars that are happening. So, in that context, and where Mr. Dua also mentioned that the geopolitics is having a reverberating effect, it's going to impact our exchange rates. If our exchange rates fall, it will have an impact on the inflation, and therefore trying to have the inflation contained within the target 4% would be very challenging as we move forward. Let's take the small example of Syria falling. Now, how do we get rock phosphate, which is important for fertilizer, which is important for our food security? And if we don't manage all of that entire supply chain, or if the prices go up, it's going to impact our exchange rates, and again, it will impact the inflation. In fact, one of the things that you mentioned was CBDC being a focus area. So it'll be interesting to see how the incoming governor is going to use technology such as CBDC to manage issues such as the booming fertilizer subsidy, as an example, because CBDC is perfect for giving direct benefit transfer to the farmers through programmable interfaces. So that's one large area that will be a challenge, which is the geopolitics and the technology. In fact, along with the technology, one thing that was not mentioned till now is the fact that there is a large amount of technology driven fraud that's happening. We see that with the Prime Minister coming out in the Mann Ki Baat on how the poor or the unsuspecting and the vulnerable sections are being targeted through fraud over UPI and over credit cards and so on and so forth. So these are reaching a large. It's becoming a virus in itself, and therefore, how does RBI step in and manage it will also be very, very interesting to see. The other age-old conflict that's going on and goes on is the discussion between reducing the interest rate, managing inflation, and not impacting growth. So obviously, if the inflation rates are kept high, that manages inflation, and inflation is kept under check. But the money available for people to invest and create new jobs and growth also gets limited. And so it's a trade-off that one has to do, and it's a fine balance, because if we let the interest rates come down, obviously there'll be growth, but the inflation is going to take away the ability to buy goods from the very poor of the society, and that's a very fine balance that continues to be managed. And so it'll be interesting to see how the new RBI governor manages it. Just a side note, he's also my senior from my college in IIT. So I'm pretty sure he's going to be able to navigate these challenges given his background in modeling, in technology, and also in public policy that he has. Having said that, the other challenge that we also see is managing the banking sector itself. A lot of cleaning up has been done. The so-called bad debt bank was created, but we need to ensure that the good work continues, that the systemic risk to the system is continuously monitored, is reduced. We have seen very harsh actions being taken against fintech because of the need to control systemic risk. So we need to ensure that that continues, that as an economy, the financial system should not collapse. There should be no systemic risk. But at the same time, the new age fintech should be guided in a manner that they grow without impacting or adding to the systemic risk in the country. And these are challenging questions. In fact, we have seen that with the election of President Trump, there is a newfound enthusiasm for cryptos. Now, for anyone who is into economics and will look at the impact of crypto on Indian economy per se,
Yes.
will clearly come to the conclusion that that's not something which is good. And therefore, how does the new governor manage that becomes a challenge. And there are plenty more issues that I can list. It's going to be a very, very complex job that the incoming governor will be looking at.
Yes, every tenure, of course, comes with its own challenges. But Sharad, bringing you into the conversation, another point that has been raised by the outgoing governor is financial inclusion. Now, of course, India, its banks, they've really made remarkable progress in terms of uh, reaching some sort of financial inclusion goals in the past decade or so. But with the new governor taking over, how do you view what will be his priorities as far as financial inclusion is concerned, in his tenure?
Good evening, Devika. Good evening to my fellow panelists and NewsX viewers. I think I would like to look at this from a remnants point of view. You know, the way financial inclusion happened. I'll start with what you said. I mean, we've achieved massive milestone in financial inclusion. We've got, more than 50 crore accounts, which have been opened. And I remember when these accounts were being set up, there was a lot of criticism that what will people do with these accounts if they don't have money to deposit and so on. So, all these political statements and non-political statements. But then at the end of the day, we found that these accounts came out to be very, very handy for DBT. And today, from keeping money under your pots and behind the curtains or under the mattress, today we have money lying in the bank, and these accounts are carrying a lot of balance itself. And the task is not ended here. As Mr. Shaktikanta Das said, that financial inclusion still remains, because there's still quite a lot of population which needs to be included to be able to take the benefit of things like UPI, to be able to take benefits like things like DBT and so on and so forth. I think for me, Mr. Shaktikanta Das, Devika, has been one of the finest, with due respect to all his predecessors. I mean, I've been following them for a very long time, because to handle COVID-like monetary policy, I'm calling it COVID-like monetary policy because it sent the world topsy-turvy in terms of inflation. And, RBI is one of the first responsibility as the monetary policy controller is that of regulating the inflation. I remember, I've done dozens and dozens of debates that when we tried to, increase the interest rate, a lot of people said this is a supply side inflation, this is not a demand side inflation, so it's not going to have any impact. But he just hung on to his position. He believed in himself. He believed in the announcements being made by RBI. And the way he spoke, I can't stop myself from recollecting all his speeches, very closely following and commenting, analyzing, dissecting them. Not one word was spoken which was out of context. Not one word which was aggressive. Not one word which was harmful. Always very cautious and giving a very realistic picture. A lot of people said, allow me to sound a little political at times. A lot of people said that the voices coming from the government sound to be very, very flowery, sound to be very, very rosy, whereas the Reserve Bank governor is showing you the mirror. So I think he's being realistic, he's being practical, and his handling COVID, I would say, are the main takeaways as far as Mr. Shaktikanta Das is concerned. And, when a predecessor leaves a trail which is worth remembering, the task of the successor becomes tougher, because you have to match those standards. And I'm sure, government's experiment of having bureaucrats from the finance ministry, Mr. Shaktikanta Das himself was there. So I think that experiment has paid off, I would say. So because the experiment paid off, so I think Mr. Sanjay Malhotra became a choice as the Revenue Secretary, understands taxation very well, understands the fiscal part of the country very well. And I think as a transition, Devika, very important thing, transitioning from fiscal to monetary policy is not a very natural process. We should keep this in mind. People who understand finance and economics, it's not a very natural process, because you are in policy making vis-a-vis the fiscal part of the economy. And now you come to a fore where you have to make policy from a monetary perspective. And sometimes, the two ends don't meet. There was a talk, I remember, during his tenure, where a lot of people said some jhagada is going on between the government and RBI governor, some tussle is going on, they don't seem to be. But I think Mr. Das handled it so well. He never allowed this rumor or whatever to come to the surface. And it always seemed that he was aligned with the kind of policy which government does, supplementing and complementing with what government is doing. That was the takeaway. And this is what I think is expected from Mr. Malhotra, that RBI, we all know, is an independent institution. It doesn't necessarily and directly function under the instructions of the government. I'm putting it in inverted commas. It is supposed to be governed by the directors. There is always, whenever we take a decision on monetary policy, there is voting done. You have a 4:2 or a 2:4 or a 3:3, whatever. So it's a very, very independent institution. And the global perspective, Devika, as far as RBI is very important. I think balancing the rupee, I thought Mr. Shaktikant Das could have added one more aspect to the list, that balancing the rupee, because vis-a-vis dollar, we are living in an era where an alternate currency is under discussion. We are talking of BRICS currency, notwithstanding what Mr. Trump said, but we are looking at an alternate currency. We are looking at closely watching the forex reserve. The numbers keep coming out so often. Every time the reserves dip, I mean, it has been so relatable to people. Every time, forex reserve numbers come and they get reduced, people feel that my own bank balance has gone down. So I think that is the beauty of maintaining forex reserves, that whatever the country needs, and then gradually moving away from this dependence of dollar in a manner which is diplomatically correct as well. So I think it's a very, very tough task. I must say here, Devika, that being an RBI governor is not a bed of roses. In the present times, when the geopolitical and the geo-economic tensions are building, the world is getting divided, I think RBI plays its own role, even though it's not involved in geopolitics directly. But then a closely, I would say, following monetary policy does help in handling geopolitics crucially. When a very, very interesting example is rupee-ruble trade. We find that a lot of Russian companies, they had piles of rupee which are gathered here. They didn't know what to do. So I think it's a very crucial role, and Mr. Malhotra, I'm sure, is capable of handling. I'm glad he's Jayajit's senior, and I'm sure I won't say he would be as competent as Jayajit, because Jayajit himself is very competent. But then I think that masterpiece which we observed from Shaktikant Das throughout his tenure of, I think it's been over 6 years, one of the longest. I think that legacy which he's leaving behind will have to be maintained, Devika. And Mr. Malhotra would not be able to compromise, because the moment he'll compromise anything, I think it will come to the fore, it will come to the surface. So that is what an RBI governor is all about. Besides the signatures on the notes that we carry in our wallets, we're going to soon have new set of signatures. When the new set of notes come out in the market, you will have new set of signatures of Mr. Sanjay Malhotra. I promise to pay the bearer a sum of rupees dash. That is the beauty of RBI governor transitioning. Now you'll still carry the notes of Mr. Shaktikant Das, and I think every time you pull up a note where Mr. Shaktikant Das signatures are there, we will remember Devika for all that he has done over 6 years, or rather I would say all the good things that he did to the economy over the last 6 years.
Right, absolutely. I thank all of our guests for joining us on the broadcast. I've completely run out of time, but thank you so much for being with us and really giving us your perspective on this major new shift that India is about to undertake. On that note, viewers, a very short break.